When it comes to things that you enjoy, typically it's the longer it lasts, the better. A vacation, a tasty meal, or even just a Saturday afternoon that's really hitting the spot for you. But when it comes to video games, lasting longer is not always better, and especially if you're an adult. As kids, a lot of us were strapped for cash, which typically meant we didn't have very many games. So games could be longer back then, sure, because we were trying to squeeze out as much value from these games as we possibly could. But as adults, we are strapped for time. Stupid time. Always screwing things up for us, and as a result, changes the way we look at longer games. Quick little example for you, Xenoblade Chronicles, which by most accounts is a wonderful game, and it's touted as having 80 plus hours of gameplay or something super long like that. Now, as a kid, if I went to the game store and picked it up, that would have been a selling point. Flipping the game around, reading all the little bullet points, and seeing one that said 80 plus hours of gameplay, I would have been like, wow, that's a lot of hours. This is gonna be awesome. But as an adult, it might as well be a death sentence because I can't be playing games that are that long. I mean, I can, but not very many of them. And so when I see that a game lasts that long, it's like, ooh, geez, I don't know. But then again, some of you see those super long games and think, bring it on, baby. Because the thing is, if somebody's playing a game for that long, 500 hours or something, it's because they're getting a ton of enjoyment out of the game. At least I would assume so in most cases. You don't hear somebody say, yeah, I played Breath of the Wild for 500 hours, thought it was total crap. No. Those are the super fans of the game who are playing it for that long because they love it so much. Of course, which genre of game is going to play a big factor as well. Games like adventure games or RPGs, they're typically going to last longer because it's sort of a slower paced, looking around, exploring, letting a story develop. Whereas with something like, say, a platformer or action platformer, you've got that very condensed gameplay where you have these just constant quick little reactions you have to make, and it would just be downright exhausting for the game to last much longer than it already does. But regardless of genre, something that most gamers will agree on is that whatever's in the game, make it count. Do not fill the game with a bunch of padding, filler, baloney nonsense. We don't want it. We don't need it. Whatever's there, it's gotta count and be worth our time. But naturally, this can be very subjective. For example, say there's a game that you don't like at all. You might say the entire game is filler. It can be subjective for specific parts of a game too. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2, a game that I played all the way through. And there were parts of the game that I liked, and there were parts that I didn't like. But parts that I didn't like that other people did like, such as the horse riding. So there I am in the game and I'm riding the horse, and don't get me wrong, it's a good looking horse. But I'm riding along and, I'm progressing through the game, and every once in a while it's just like, okay, looks like we're riding that horse again, better get used to it. But it was just a little too much for me. Whereas for other people, they loved that horse riding because you're out riding through the wilderness and it just felt very immersive for them. It was very cool. But for me, it was just a lot of time on that horse, and I would have preferred there to be less of it, therefore making the game not nearly as long. I also think that difficulty plays a big factor. You ever heard somebody say they wish Battletoads was longer? Forget about it. Some games are so challenging and intense that some people feel like they just don't really need to be any longer than they already are. And when it comes to Battletoads, something that I think doesn't get talked about enough, for why this is so difficult is how many stages there are in this game. It's like 12 or 13, something like that. That is a ton of stages for a difficult NES game. Only 3 continues too. My goodness, you dirty dog of a game. I also think that games that are part of a series get evaluated a certain type of way. Let's say you want to play the latest game in a series and you want to catch up on the series before you play that game. And the point you left off at was having never played any of the games in the series before. So you look at the other games and you think, my goodness, it's going to take forever to get through all these games and finally get to that game. Or if the games don't take very long to play through, you're like, hey, that's actually kind of nice. I can kind of plow my way through the series and then get to that latest entry in the franchise. Okay, and now here's a big one. Is the game designed to be beaten all in one sitting? Some of those platformers and action platformers from the 8 and 16-bit generations might not seem like very long games overall, say like around an hour and a half or so, maybe even less. But when you factor in having to do all of it in one single sitting, I don't know about you, but I am pretty exhausted by the end of it after I play through one of those. Not to mention, just simply having the opportunity to play a game for a straight, solid hour and a half uninterrupted can be tricky enough as it is, as an adult, but even as a kid too. In fact, quick little story for you, when I was a kid, sometimes I would get to play video games before I went to school, if I was ready in time. So one morning I'm playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and something special is happening. I'm playing much better than I ever had at that game before, and I'm making my way through the stages feeling pretty good. But it's time to go to school. Bummer. So what do? Well, what a lot of us would do, which is to leave that console on. And sure enough, when I got home after school that day, the console was no longer on because I made a rookie mistake. You gotta cover up the power light so that nobody knows the console is still on. Otherwise, they come walking by and they go, ah, the little bunion forgot to power off the console. I'll take care of that. Power down, game over. But here's the thing, would we say that's a problem with the way the game is designed for being too long? Or is it more so just a problem as a result of the realities of life and stupid time yet again always causing trouble? But when it comes to a game like a Sonic 2, which I would say is highly replayable, yeah, that's a factor too. If you're gonna have fun replaying through a game over and over, then maybe it doesn't necessarily need to be that long. I mean, you wouldn't keep replaying it unless you were having fun each time. I mean, bananas are pretty much the same thing every time, and yet I keep coming back for more. Although, maybe not this one, it's a little bit overripe. Banana muffins it would do well in though. But that about does it for what I have to say, and now it's time for what all of you have to say. What do you think when it comes to the length of your games? I would love to hear it, as always. So, for those answers and anything else you might have to say, leave your comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah. And he's talking about video games. He's